The great crystal halls of the Galactic Council buzzed with quiet conversation as delegates from across the galaxy took their seats. Ambassador Elena Vasquez straightened her simple blue uniform and tried not to feel small among the towering, crystalline forms of the Zephyrians, the chittering masses of the Kythera, and the graceful floating shapes of the ethereal collective. Humanity had been part of this grand assembly for 50 years now, ever since the Zephyrians had discovered Earth and deemed it worthy of uplift. 50 years! And humans were still treated like the new kids in class who didn't quite understand how things worked. The mining quotas for Sector 7 have been exceeded again, announced High Counselor Zakth, his crystalline voice ringing through the chamber like wind chimes in a storm. The human delegation continues to show impressive efficiency in resource extraction. Elena smiled politely. Resource extraction. That was diplomatic speak for digging rocks out of asteroids. It was honest work, and humanity was good at it. But she sometimes wondered if that was all the galaxy would ever see them as capable of doing. The Kythera delegate, a massive insect-like creature with 4 arms and compound eyes, clicked his mandibles in what Elena had learned was their version of polite agreement. The soft species shows promise in manual labor. Perhaps we should increase their quotas. Soft species. Elena's jaw tightened slightly, but she kept her expression neutral. That's what they called humans throughout the galaxy. Soft species. Not because of their bodies, though humans were certainly squishier than crystalline Zephyrians or armored Kythera. No, they were called soft because the galaxy considered them gentle, naive, and technologically primitive. It wasn't entirely wrong. When humanity had first been contacted, they were still using chemical rockets to barely reach their own moon. The Zephyrians had energy weapons that could slice through asteroids like butter. The Kythera had plasma cannons that could melt steel at 1,000 yards. The ethereal collective could manipulate gravity itself to crush their enemies. Humans had gunpowder and nuclear weapons, technologies so old that most galactic civilizations had museum pieces more advanced than humanity's best military hardware. Ambassador Vasquez. High Counselor Zakth's attention turned to her, and Elena felt the weight of thousands of alien eyes. How does humanity feel about expanding operations in the outer spiral? There are significant asteroid fields there that require attention. Elena stood, her movements feeling clumsy compared to the fluid grace of the other delegates. Humanity would be honored to serve the Council's interests, she said, the words tasting like dust in her mouth. It was the expected response. Humanity was grateful for their place in galactic society. They were happy to mine asteroids and process raw materials, while the real civilizations handled important matters like trade negotiations, territorial disputes, and military operations. The truth was, Elena wasn't entirely sure humanity belonged anywhere else. Earth's military consisted of projectile weapons, missiles, and some experimental energy systems that were laughably primitive by galactic standards. When she'd first seen a Zephyrian pulse rifle demonstrate its power by vaporizing a small moon, she'd understood why humans were considered a soft species. How do you fight someone who can unmake matter with a thought? Excellent, Zakth said, already moving on to other business. The Kythera delegation has requested additional security for their mining operations in Sector 12. There have been complications with the hegemony forces. Elena's ears perked up. The hegemony was a coalition of militant species from the galaxy's rim. They'd been pushing into council space for months now, claiming that the inner worlds were hoarding resources. Tensions had been building steadily, and there were whispers that actual fighting might break out soon. Surely this is a matter for the Peace Enforcement Division, said Counselor Vatar of the Ethereal Collective. Her voice like music played through water. A few gravity wells should convince the hegemony to reconsider their position. The hegemony has new ship designs, the Kythera delegate clicked nervously. Their shields are resistant to our usual methods. Perhaps a more direct approach, is needed. Elena found herself speaking before she'd really thought about it. Humanity would be willing to contribute to any peacekeeping efforts. The chamber fell silent. She could feel the attention of every delegate, and none of it felt particularly friendly. High Counselor Zach's crystalline form shimmered with what Elena had learned was polite amusement. Ambassador, humanity's enthusiasm is appreciated, but I think this situation requires more sophisticated solutions than your people are equipped to provide. Our kinetic weapons might be useful in situations where energy shields are proving problematic, Elena pressed, knowing she was probably making a mistake but unable to stop herself. Kinetic weapons? Counselor Vatar's musical voice carried a note of confusion. You mean projectiles? Physical matter launched at targets? Yes, ma'am. Bullets, missiles, railgun rounds, anything that hits the target through physical impact, rather than energy transfer. The amusement in the chamber was no longer polite. Elena could hear the Kithara delegates' mandibles clicking in rapid bursts, their equivalent of laughter. Several Zephyrian crystals were chiming in harmonious notes that she recognized as their version of mirth. My dear ambassador, Zakthi said gently, as if explaining something to a child, physical projectiles are, how shall I put this, somewhat archaic. Modern defensive systems have made such weapons obsolete. Energy shields, matter disruptors, gravity wells, there are countless ways to neutralize simple projectiles before they reach their targets. With respect, High Counselor, our projectiles aren't always simple. Perhaps not. Zakth agreed diplomatically. But I think it would be best if humanity continued to focus on what it does best. Resource extraction, logistics support, perhaps some technical assistance with supply lines. Leave the military operations to species with more appropriate capabilities. Elena sat down, her cheeks burning with embarrassment and frustration. Around her, the conversation moved on to deployment schedules and tactical considerations, none of which included humanity. They would be assigned to supply runs and asteroid mining, while the real warriors handled the real fighting. After the session ended, Elena found herself walking alone through the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars through the massive, transparent aluminum windows. The space station that housed the Galactic Council was a marvel of engineering, a city-sized construct that orbited the galaxy's political center. Ships from dozens of species came and went constantly, their exotic designs making even humanity's most advanced vessels look like crude metal boxes by comparison. Frustrated, Elena turned to find Admiral Sarah Chen standing behind her. Chen was one of the few other humans on the station, representing Earth's small but growing space navy. She was a compact woman with sharp eyes and graying hair. Someone who'd spent her career trying to make humanity's primitive military relevant in a galaxy full of energy weapons and gravity manipulators. Was it that obvious? Elena asked. Only to another human, Chen replied, moving to stand beside her at the window. The Zephyrians probably thought you were displaying appropriate enthusiasm for learning. The Kithara likely assumed you were confused about the hierarchy of species, and the Ethereals, well, who knows what they think about anything? It's just... Elena gestured helplessly at the parade of alien ships outside. We've been part of this community for 50 years, and we're still treated like we just learned to walk upright. Maybe because we did, relatively speaking, Chen said mildly. 50 years ago, we were still figuring out how to build reliable space stations. These people have been traveling between stars since before humans discovered agriculture. But we're not stupid, Elena protested. We've learned fast. Our engineering is solid, our people are hardworking, and our military technology might be different, but it's not useless. Chen was quiet for a moment, watching a hegemony destroyer pass by in the distance. It was a sleek, predatory-looking ship, all angles and aggressive lines. Even at this distance, Elena could see the glow of energy weapons charging along its hull. You know what the real problem is? Chen said finally. It's not that our technology is primitive, it's that it's different. Every other species in the galaxy fights the same way. Energy weapons, shields, exotic matter manipulation. They've been refining the same basic approaches for millennia. And we throw rocks, Elena said bitterly. We throw rocks very, very well, Chen corrected. The question is whether anyone will give us the chance to show them how well. The council made it pretty clear today that they won't. Chen smiled, and there was something in her expression that Elena couldn't quite read. The council thinks this hegemony situation will be resolved through conventional means. Energy weapons versus energy shields. Plasma against particle beams. The same elegant dance of destruction that's been going on since before Earth had complex life. You think they're wrong? I think the hegemony didn't pick this fight without a reason, Chen said. And I think the council is about to discover that sometimes the old ways stop working. Elena studied the Admiral's face. You know something. I know that humanity's been very quietly working on some projects that the council never asked about, Chen said carefully. Research into kinetic systems that might be relevant if conventional methods prove insufficient. What kind of kinetic systems? Chen's smile widened slightly. The kind that throw rocks really, really fast. Before Elena could ask what that meant, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed, and the calm atmosphere of the observation deck was suddenly replaced by urgent activity as crew members rushed to their stations. Attention all personnel, came an announcement in the council's standard diplomatic language. We have received reports of hegemony attacks on council installations in sectors 8 and 9. All military delegates are requested to report to the emergency command center immediately. Chen straightened, her expression becoming serious. Looks like we're about to find out if the old ways still work. As they hurried toward the command center, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was about to change. For 50 years, humanity had been the junior partner in galactic civilization, grateful for their small place and eager to prove themselves worthy of the advanced species around them. But what if being advanced wasn't the same thing as being right? What if all those elegant energy weapons and sophisticated defense systems had a weakness that no one had bothered to consider? What if sometimes the best solution to a complex problem was the simplest one? The thought followed Elena through the corridors of the station, growing stronger with each step. Behind them, through the observation deck's windows, more hegemony ships appeared in the distance, their weapons charging, with ominous light. The galaxy was about to go to war, and everyone assumed they knew how that war would be fought. Everyone except humanity. The emergency command center hummed with activity as delegates from across the galaxy gathered around holographic displays showing the developing crisis. Elena stood near the back with Admiral Chen, trying to follow the rapid-fire discussions. In dozens of alien languages, while universal translators struggled to keep up. 17 installations destroyed in the first wave, reported General Krickstar of the Kythera Military Division, his 4 arms gesturing at tactical displays showing red zones spreading across star maps. Their new ships are using some kind of enhanced energy weapons. Our standard plasma barriers are only providing 60% effectiveness. High Counselor Zakh's crystalline form pulsed with concerned colors. How is that possible? Kythera. Defensive systems have been refined for over 2,000 years. The hegemony has been busy, Admiral Sephiroth of the Zephyrian Fleet stated, her voice creating harmonic frequencies that made Elena's teeth ache. Intelligence suggests they've developed focused particle beams that can destabilize our crystal. Matrix shields, crude but effective. Elena watched the tactical displays with growing concern. The red zones weren't just growing, they were accelerating. Each successful hegemony attack seemed to encourage more aggression, and the Council forces were falling back faster than they were advancing. What about the ethereal collective's gravity well generators? Asked Counselor Vatar, her flowing form rippling with anxiety. Surely those can disrupt their formations? Tried, Sephiroth replied grimly. They're using some kind of inertial dampening field. Our gravity wells are having minimal effect on their ship movements. Elena felt Chen tense beside her. They've been planning this for a long time, the Admiral murmured. Every major defensive system in the galaxy, and they've found counters for all of them. Impossible, Crixtar clicked aggressively. No species is that advanced. The hegemony consists of rim-world primitives with barely functional technology. Primitives who are currently destroying our installations faster than we can reinforce them, Zack observed dryly. The next few hours painted an increasingly grim picture. The hegemony wasn't just attacking randomly. They were systematically targeting key strategic points while avoiding major fleet concentrations. Their ships would appear, destroy their targets with devastating efficiency, and disappear before Council forces could respond effectively. It's like they know exactly where our fleets are and how long it takes us to reach each target, General Crixtar admitted reluctantly. Their intelligence network must be far more sophisticated than we assumed. Elena studied the attack patterns on the displays. Something about them felt familiar, but she couldn't quite place what it was. The attacks were methodical, efficient, and seemed designed to cause maximum damage while minimizing the risk of serious retaliation. They're not trying to win quickly, she realized suddenly. They're trying to prove that you can't protect your assets. The room fell silent as alien eyes focused on her. Elena felt her cheeks burn, but Chen's encouraging nod gave her the courage to continue. Look at the targets, she said, pointing at the display. Mining stations, supply depots, communication relays. They're not going after military installations or population centers. They're attacking the infrastructure that makes the Council economy work. An astute observation, Zack admitted. But what does that tell us about stopping them? It tells us they're not interested in a quick victory, Elena said. They want to drag this out, make it expensive, prove that the Council can't protect its own territory. That means they're confident they can keep this up indefinitely. Which brings us back to the central problem, Sephiroth said. How do we fight an enemy that has effective counters to all our standard weapon systems? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Elena could see the frustration on alien faces throughout the room. These were species that had dominated galactic warfare for millennia, and they were being outmaneuvered by what they'd always considered primitive rim-world barbarians. Perhaps, Admiral Chen said quietly, it's time to consider non-standard weapon systems. General Crixtar's mandibles clicked dismissively. Such as? Kinetic weapons, Chen replied simply. The reaction was immediate. Several Zephyrian crystals began chiming in what Elena recognized as their expression of polite disbelief. Crixtar's mandibles clicked so rapidly it sounded like static. Even Councillor Vatar's usually serene form rippled with what might have been suppressed laughter. Admiral Chen, Zack said gently, we appreciate humanity's eagerness to contribute, but kinetic weapons are simply not viable against modern defensive systems. Any species advanced enough to threaten Council installations would certainly have point defense systems capable of intercepting projectiles. With respect, High Counselor, Chen replied, have you tested that assumption against these particular enemies? We don't need to test it, Sephiroth said. It's basic military science. Projectile weapons are countered by particle screens, laser point defense, gravity deflection, or simple armor plating. Any competent military force would have multiple redundant systems. And yet, Chen observed, these same competent military forces are currently losing installations across 3 sectors to an enemy they underestimated. That hit home. Elena could see the impact of Chen's words in the way several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The hegemony had already proved that assumptions about military capabilities could be dangerously wrong. What exactly are you proposing? Zack asked, his tone suggesting he was humoring them rather than seriously considering their input. Let humanity send a small fleet to one of the threatened sectors, Chen said. If our kinetic weapons prove ineffective, you've lost nothing, except a few primitive ships. If they prove effective, she shrugged, then maybe it's time to reconsider what primitive actually means. Absolutely not, Krikstar declared. Sending untested forces against a proven enemy is tactically unsound. We cannot risk... Risk what? Elena interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. Humanity's 12 ships against an enemy that's already destroyed 17 of your installations? What exactly are you protecting us from that's worse than what's already happening? The room erupted in alien conversation as delegates debated in their native languages. Elena caught fragments through the translators. Arguments about human inexperience, concerns about primitive technology, debates about the wisdom of desperate measures. Finally, High Counselor Zakth called for order. The suggestion has merit, he admitted reluctantly, though perhaps not in the way Admiral Chen intended. Elena felt her heart sink. Here came the polite dismissal, the gentle relegation back to supply duties and asteroid mining. The hegemony has proven quite effective at avoiding our main battle fleets, Zakth continued. They seem to have excellent intelligence about our ship movements and capabilities, but they might not be as well informed about human military assets. You want to use us as bait, Chen said, and there was no accusation in her voice, just professional assessment. I want to use you as an unknown variable, Zakth corrected, a force that doesn't fit the enemy's intelligence profile and might therefore achieve tactical surprise. Whether your weapons prove effective or not, your presence might disrupt their operational patterns long enough for our main forces to engage. Elena could see Chen considering the proposal. It wasn't exactly what they'd asked for, but it was more than humanity had been offered before. A chance to prove themselves in actual combat, even if the Council still considered it a long shot. Which sector? Chen asked. Kepler 442. General Krikstar replied. 3 strategic mining stations and a major communication relay. The hegemony has been probing the system for weeks, and our analysts believe it will be their next major target. What kind of defensive assets are currently in the system? None, Sephiroth admitted. We've withdrawn our forces to more defensible positions. The system is essentially undefended, except for the installation's own limited capabilities. Elena felt a chill. They were being sent to defend an abandoned system with weapons the Council considered obsolete against an enemy that had proved capable of destroying anything they sent against it. When do we deploy? Chen asked, as if she was discussing a routine training exercise rather than what sounded like a suicide mission. Immediately, Zakth replied. The hegemony has been increasing their activity in that region. We estimate you have perhaps 72 hours before they make their move. As the meeting broke up and delegates scattered to coordinate their respective forces, Elena found herself walking beside Chen toward the human quarters of the station. Admiral, she said quietly, are you sure about this? The Council is essentially using us as a distraction while they reposition their real military assets. Chen nodded. That's exactly what they're doing. The question is whether we're content to be just a distraction. What do you mean? Chen's smile was sharp and cold. I mean that the Council is right about one thing. The hegemony doesn't know anything about human military capabilities. They've probably studied Zephyrian crystal matrices and Cathara plasma systems extensively, but I doubt they've given much thought to what humans might do in a fight. Because they assumed we couldn't fight effectively? Because everyone assumed that, Chen replied. Including us until recently. Elena frowned. What changed? We stopped trying to fight like Zephyrians or Kithara, Chen said. We stopped trying to build energy weapons that could compete with civilizations that have been refining energy weapons for thousands of years. Instead, we started asking a different question, which was, what happens if you throw a rock fast enough? Before Elena could ask what that meant, Chen was already walking away, heading toward the communications center to contact the human fleet. Elena stood in the corridor, watching alien crew members hurry past on their various duties, and tried to shake the feeling that something fundamental was about to change. The galaxy was going to war, and humanity was about to get its first real chance to prove itself in combat. She just wasn't sure whether that would turn out to be a blessing or a curse. In 72 hours, they would find out. The human fleet that arrived at Kepler 442 looked nothing like the elegant vessels of the other galactic civilizations. Where Zephyrian ships were crystalline works of art and Kithara vessels resembled organic growths, human ships were brutal, functional rectangles of armor plating and weapon mounts. The UES Determination led the formation, followed by 11 other destroyers that looked like someone had welded gun barrels to flying bricks. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Determination, studying the tactical displays that showed the system they'd been sent to defend. 3 mining stations orbited the system's asteroid belt, each one a critical source of rare metals for the galactic economy. A communication relay sat at the system's edge, handling data traffic for dozens of nearby worlds. All of them were currently undefended except for basic civilian shields and emergency beacon systems. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Commander Williams from the sensor station, "we're picking up multiple hyperspace signatures on the edge of the system. Configuration matches Hegemony Destroyer class." "How many?" Chen asked, her voice calm despite the fact that this was humanity's first real military engagement against a galactic power. 14 confirmed contacts, possibly more still in hyperspace. Chen nodded grimly. 14 destroyers against 12 human ships, in a system with no backup and no retreat route except through the enemy formation. The Council had known this would be a desperate fight when they sent humanity here. "Signal the fleet," Chen ordered. "All ships to combat spacing. Target priorities are the mining stations and the relay. We stop them from reaching those installations no matter what." "Aye, Admiral," Fleet acknowledges. The Hegemony ships were sliding into normal space with the fluid grace of vessels designed by species that had mastered faster than light. Travel centuries before humans had learned to smelt iron. Their hulls were dark, angular things that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And Chen could see energy weapons charging along their flanks with ominous blue glows. "They're not even bothering to hail us," observed Commander Torres from the communications station. "Looks like they plan to go straight through us." "Can't say I blame them," Chen replied. 12 primitive ships with outdated weapons against 14 modern destroyers. If I were them, I wouldn't waste time on conversation either. The Hegemony formation was spreading out now, clearly intending to envelope the human fleet and attack the installations from multiple angles simultaneously. It was a textbook maneuver, the kind of thing taught in every military academy across the galaxy. Divide your forces to attack multiple targets while preventing the enemy from concentrating their defenses. "Admiral," Williams called out, "we're being scanned. Intense sensor sweeps across the entire fleet." "Let them look," Chen said calmly. "They're trying to figure out what we are and how we fight. Standard practice when engaging an unknown enemy." On the main display, Chen could see the results of those scans being processed by Hegemony tactical computers. Their formation adjusted slightly as they analyzed human ship configurations and weapon signatures. She could almost imagine the alien commanders discussing what they'd found. Chemical rockets for propulsion, primitive but functional. Fusion reactors for power, adequate but hardly impressive. No energy weapons detected, no particle beam projectors, no plasma cannon signatures. Just some kind of unusual electromagnetic system running down the central axis of each ship. Kinetic weapons, the Hegemony analysts would conclude. Railguns or mass drivers, probably launching simple projectiles at moderate velocities. Hardly a threat to modern military vessels with proper shields and point defense systems. "Range to lead Hegemony elements?" Chen asked. 800,000 kilometers in closing, Williams reported. They're maintaining approach vector toward mining station Alpha. "Any sign they consider us a serious threat?" "Negative, Admiral." Their formation suggests they plan to screen us with 4 ships while the remaining 10 proceed to attack the installations. Chen smiled coldly. Perfect. The hegemony commanders were making exactly the mistake she'd hoped they would make. They were treating this like a conventional engagement against a conventional enemy, following conventional tactical doctrine. Unfortunately for them, nothing about this engagement was going to be conventional. Signal all ships, Chen ordered. Begin charging sequence. Across the human fleet, massive capacitor banks began drawing power from fusion reactors. The electromagnetic systems that ran down the center of each ship started humming with barely contained energy. On the Determination's bridge, Chen could feel the vibration through the deck plating as magnetic coils aligned and power levels climbed toward maximum. Charging sequence initiated, reported the weapons officer. Estimated time to full charge, 4 minutes 30 seconds. Range to optimal firing solution, 600,000 kilometers, Admiral. Current closure rate puts us at optimal range in 3 minutes 50 seconds. Chen nodded. The timing would be tight, but it should work. The key was to let the hegemony ships get close enough that they couldn't maneuver effectively before the human weapons reached them. Admiral, Williams called out with a note of concern. The hegemony ships are accelerating. Looks like they want to get past us quickly. Of course they do, Chen replied. They think we're irrelevant. 4 ships to keep us busy while 10 attack. Undefended targets. It's exactly what I would do in their position. The next few minutes passed with agonizing slowness as both fleets approached each other at a significant fraction of light speed. The hegemony formation was beautiful to watch, Chen had to admit. 14 ships moving in perfect coordination, their energy weapons charged and ready, their shields shimmering with protective fields that could deflect anything the galaxy had. Thrown at them for the past 1,000 years. Hegemony ships are powering weapons, Torres reported. Energy signatures consistent with enhanced particle beam projectors. The same weapons that have been punching through Council defenses, Chen observed. Range? 500,000 kilometers and closing. Chen could see the hegemony ships beginning to separate into their attack formation. 4 vessels were adjusting course to engage the human fleet while 10 continued toward the mining stations. It was a confident move. The kind of thing you did when you were certain the enemy couldn't hurt you badly enough to matter. Weapons status? Chen asked. 96% charge and climbing, replied the weapons officer. Magnetic field alignment nominal, projectile loaded and secured. Range to optimal firing solution? 200,000 kilometers, Admiral, 47 seconds. Chen felt her pulse quicken. This was it. Humanity's first real test in galactic warfare, against an enemy that had proved capable of defeating every other military force they'd encountered. In less than a minute, they would find out whether 50 years of human military development had produced anything worth having. Admiral, Williams said suddenly, the 4 hegemony ships detailed to engage us are launching fighters. Chen looked at the tactical display and saw small craft separating from the larger vessels. Sleek, fast interceptors designed to harass enemy formations and provide point defense against incoming missiles. How many? 24 confirmed launches, possibly more incoming. Perfect, Chen said, and her weapons officer looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Admiral? Those fighters are positioned to intercept incoming missiles, Chen explained. Their point defense systems are optimized for shooting down guided projectiles that can be tracked, targeted, and destroyed before impact. Yes, ma'am. But our projectiles aren't guided, Chen continued. They're just very, very fast pieces of metal flying in straight lines. The range counter hit optimal firing distance. All ships, Chen broadcast to the fleet, you are authorized to fire. Target the lead hegemony destroyer. Maximum velocity projectiles. Firing, reported the weapons officer. The UES Determination shuddered as its railgun discharged. Down the length of the ship, magnetic coils fired in sequence, accelerating a tungsten projectile to 15% of light speed in the space of a few milliseconds. The other 11 human ships fired almost simultaneously, their own railguns, hurling projectiles at velocities that turned simple chunks of metal into weapons of devastating power. "Time to target?" Chen asked. "Impact in 14 seconds, Williams replied, his voice tight with anticipation. Chen watched the tactical display as 12 invisible projectiles crossed the space between the fleets. The hegemony fighters were trying to intercept, their energy weapons firing at computed intercept points, but the projectiles were too fast and too small to target effectively. "Hegemony-led destroyer is attempting evasive maneuvers," Torres reported. "At that range and those velocities, evasive maneuvers are meaningless," Chen replied. "You can't dodge something you can't see coming until it's already hit you." The first projectile struck the hegemony destroyer's shields at roughly 45,000 kilometers per second. For a brief moment, the alien ship's defensive fields flared with brilliant light as they tried to absorb or deflect the incoming kinetic energy. Then physics took over. The shields failed catastrophically, overwhelmed by kinetic energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The tungsten projectile punched through the ship's hull like it was made of paper, continued through the vessel's central structure, and emerged from the other side, trailing debris and atmosphere. The second projectile hit 3 milliseconds later, passing through the weakened hull and striking the ship's power core. The explosion lit up space for thousands of kilometers as the destroyer's fusion reactor went critical, but Chen's attention was already focused on the tactical display, where something unprecedented was happening. The tungsten projectiles weren't stopping after hitting their target. The third projectile, slightly off course due to the first destroyer's death throes, struck a second hegemony ship. The fourth and fifth projectiles continued on their ballistic trajectories and slammed into a third vessel. In the space of 10 seconds, 3 hegemony destroyers had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris by weapons that most of the galaxy considered obsolete. "Jesus Christ," Williams whispered. "They went right through them." Chen was already giving orders. "All ships, reload and prepare for second volley. Target the remaining ships heading for the mining stations." "Admiral," Torres called out, "we're receiving emergency transmissions from the surviving hegemony vessels. They're requesting immediate reinforcements and tactical analysis of human weapon systems." "I bet they are," Chen replied grimly. "Weapons status?" "Charging sequence initiated," the weapons officer reported. "Full charge in 3 minutes 40 seconds. On the tactical display, the surviving hegemony ships were scattering, their neat formation dissolving as commanders tried to process what they'd just witnessed. Ships that had shrugged off the galaxy's most advanced energy weapons had been destroyed by simple chunks of metal, moving very fast. "The remaining hegemony forces are requesting parley," Torres announced. "Denied," Chen replied. "They came here to destroy Council installations. They can leave or be destroyed. Those are their options." "Admiral," Williams said, his voice filled with something like awe. "We're receiving communications from across the galaxy. Word of this engagement is spreading fast." Chen nodded. She'd expected that. The galaxy had just witnessed something that military analysts had considered impossible: kinetic weapons proving effective against modern defensive systems. Every military force in known space would be scrambling to understand what they'd just seen. "Signal the fleet," Chen ordered. "Second volley, same targeting priorities. Let's finish this." The human ships fired again, their railguns hurling projectiles across impossible distances at impossible speeds. More hegemony ships died, their advanced technology useless against the simple physics of mass times acceleration. When it was over, only 3 hegemony vessels remained, fleeing the system at maximum velocity while broadcasting desperate reports to their command structure. Chen stood on the bridge of the Determination, looking at a tactical display that showed the debris of 11 destroyed enemy ships scattered across the Kepler 442 system. The mining stations and communication relay remained untouched, their safety purchased with tungsten projectiles and the application of fundamental physical laws. "Admiral," Torres said quietly, "we're receiving communication requests from every major power in the galaxy. Everyone wants to know what just happened here." Chen smiled. "Tell them," she said, "that humanity just fired its first railgun." The galaxy would never be the same. The news of Kepler 442 spread across the galaxy faster than the fastest ships could travel. Emergency council sessions were called on dozens of worlds as military leaders tried to understand what they'd witnessed. In the span of 20 minutes, a human fleet had destroyed 11 hegemony vessels using weapons that the galactic community had considered obsolete for millennia. Ambassador Elena Vasquez found herself at the center of a storm of attention she'd never wanted. The same delegates who had politely dismissed humanity's military capabilities just days before were now demanding detailed explanations of human kinetic weapon technology. The corridors of the council station buzzed with urgent conversations, in dozens of languages, and every conversation seemed to involve the word "impossible," translated into various alien tongues. "The initial reports must be in error," General Krikstar was saying as Elena entered the emergency session chamber. "Kinetic weapons cannot achieve the velocities described. The energy requirements alone would exceed any reasonable power generation capability." And yet, High Counselor Zakth replied, his crystalline form pulsing with troubled colors, "We have confirmed sensor data from 14 different sources. Human projectiles achieved approximately 15% of light speed." 15%? Admiral Sephiroth of the Zephyrian fleet sounded incredulous. That's approaching relativistic velocities. The kinetic energy alone would be equivalent to a tactical nuclear weapon, Elena supplied, taking her seat at the human delegation table. "For each projectile." The chamber fell silent. Elena could feel the weight of alien attention focused on her, but this time it felt different from before. There was no polite condescension, no gentle amusement at human naivety. There was something that looked very much like fear. "How?" Counselor Vatar asked, her musical voice carrying harmonics of confusion. "Our theoretical physicists have modeled kinetic acceleration systems extensively. The power requirements for achieving such velocities should be prohibitive." Elena looked around the chamber, seeing alien faces that had suddenly become very interested in human answers to human questions. These were the same beings who had spent 50 years treating humanity like gifted children, capable of useful work, but not ready for serious responsibilities. "Fusion reactors," Elena said simply. "Very large fusion reactors feeding power to very sophisticated magnetic acceleration systems." "Impossible," Krikstar clicked dismissively. "Fusion reactors cannot generate sufficient power density for relativistic acceleration. The engineering constraints that apply to your fusion reactors," Elena interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. "Human fusion technology developed along different lines than galactic standard. That was, putting it mildly," Elena thought. While the rest of the galaxy had focused on elegant, efficient reactors that produced steady power over long periods, humanity had developed what could only be described as controlled fusion explosions. They were crude, dangerous, and generated enormous amounts of power in very short bursts, perfect for charging the capacitor banks that fed electromagnetic railguns. "I want a complete technical analysis," Zakth declared. "Every human ship design, every weapon specification, every detail of their power generation systems." "With respect, High Counselor," Elena replied, "that's not your decision to make." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Elena could see alien expressions shifting from confusion to something that looked like anger. "Ambassador," Sephiroth said carefully, "perhaps you misunderstand the gravity of the situation. These weapons represent a fundamental shift in galactic military balance. The Council has a responsibility to respect the sovereignty of its member species." Elena cut her off. "Just as humanity respects your right to keep your crystal matrix technology and gravity manipulation systems private." That's entirely different, Krikstar protested. Those are defensive technologies used for peaceful purposes. Really? Elena asked. Because I distinctly remember seeing those same technologies deployed as weapons in military operations. The difference is that when you use advanced technology to kill people, it's considered sophisticated warfare. When we do it, it's considered a threat that needs to be controlled. Elena could see she was pushing boundaries that had never been tested before. For 50 years, humanity had been the grateful junior partner, accepting guidance and instruction from their more advanced neighbors. But Kepler 442 had changed something fundamental about that relationship. The hegemony is requesting immediate ceasefire negotiations, reported an aide who had just entered the chamber. They claim the use of relativistic kinetic weapons violates several galactic warfare conventions. Elena almost laughed. Which conventions would those be? The Zephyrian Accords of 2387 prohibit the use of weapons designed to cause unnecessarily cruel destruction, Zakth replied. The Cathera Military Ethics Agreement bans weapons that cannot distinguish between military and civilian targets. Our weapons hit exactly what they're aimed at, Elena pointed out. Nothing could be more precise than a projectile following a ballistic trajectory to a computed target. But at those velocities, the destruction is total, Vatar protested. There's no opportunity for surrender, no chance for crews to abandon ship, no possibility of disabling rather than destroying. Elena stared at the alien delegates, trying to process what she was hearing. Let me understand this correctly. You're upset because our weapons are too effective? We're concerned because your weapons fundamentally alter the nature of military engagement, Zakth explained. Galactic warfare has operated under certain understood principles for thousands of years. Energy weapons can be countered by energy shields. Plasma weapons can be neutralized by particle dispersal fields. There are established protocols for surrender, for minimizing casualties, for conducting civilized military operations. Civilized military operations? Elena repeated. You mean the kind that have been failing to stop the hegemony for months? That hit home. Elena could see the impact in the way several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The hegemony had been systematically destroying council installations precisely because those civilized military operations had proven inadequate. The point remains, Sephiroth said, that kinetic weapons at relativistic velocities represent an escalation that could destabilize galactic security. More than allowing the hegemony to destroy critical infrastructure? Elena asked. The hegemony can be negotiated with, Krikstar insisted. They have legitimate grievances about resource distribution that can be addressed through diplomatic channels. Elena looked around the chamber, seeing alien faces that genuinely seemed to believe what they were saying. These were civilizations that had spent millennia refining the art of controlled conflict, of warfare that followed rules and conventions, of military operations that were ultimately about politics rather than destruction. And then humanity had arrived with weapons that ignored all of those careful conventions and simply destroyed whatever they were pointed at. You're afraid, Elena realized suddenly. You're not concerned about galactic stability or military ethics. You're afraid because we just proved that all your sophisticated defensive systems are useless. The silence that followed her words was deafening. Elena could see the truth of her statement in every alien expression around her. Every shield system in the galaxy, she continued, every energy barrier, every defensive field that your civilizations have spent thousands of years perfecting, none of them can stop a chunk of tungsten moving at 15% of light speed. That's not entirely accurate, Zakth said, but his protest sounded weak even to Elena's ears. Isn't it? Elena asked. How many Zephyrian ships could stop a railgun projectile? Sephiroth was quiet for a long moment. Our crystal matrix shields could theoretically absorb the kinetic energy, but the power requirements for maintaining such fields would be prohibitive. What about Cathera defensive systems? Krikstar's mandibles clicked nervously. Our armor plating is designed for energy weapon impacts. Kinetic penetration at those velocities would present challenges. Elena nodded. She could see the understanding spreading through the chamber like a wave. Every military force in the galaxy had designed their defenses around energy weapons, because that's what everyone used. Kinetic weapons had been dismissed as primitive because they could be stopped by relatively simple countermeasures. But no one had considered what happened when kinetic weapons stopped being simple. The real question, Elena said, is what happens next. The hegemony knows that their current strategy won't work against human kinetic weapons. Every military force in the galaxy knows that their current defensive systems are inadequate. The HFY old balance of power is gone. Then we need new defensive systems, Vatar said, countermeasures against kinetic weapons. Good luck with that, Elena replied. You're talking about stopping projectiles that you can't see coming until they hit you, traveling at velocities that make evasive action meaningless, carrying kinetic energy that makes nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. There must be solutions, Zakth insisted. Predictive tracking systems, enhanced point defense, gravity wells to deflect incoming projectiles. Elena shrugged. Maybe, but while you're developing those systems, humanity will be refining ours. Faster projectiles, better targeting, more sophisticated acceleration systems. It's an arms race now, and we have a significant head start. The implications of that statement settled over the chamber like a dark cloud. For the first time in galactic history, humanity wasn't the technologically inferior species begging for scraps of advanced knowledge. They were the civilization that everyone else needed to catch up to. What does humanity want? Zakth asked finally. Elena smiled. The same thing we've always wanted. To be treated as equals, rather than as promising children who might someday be worthy of sitting at the adult table. And in exchange? In exchange, we'll share our kinetic weapon technology with Council military forces. Help you develop defensive systems. Work together to end this war with the hegemony. Elena could see the alien delegates processing her offer. It was reasonable, fair, and completely changed the fundamental relationship between humanity and the galactic community. There's just one condition, Elena added, which is no more mining quotas, no more supply runs to backwater systems, no more treating human military forces as useful distractions while the real work is done by real civilizations. Elena stood up, looking around the chamber at alien faces that were seeing humanity clearly for the first time. The soft species just grew teeth, she said. The question is whether you want us as partners or as something else entirely. The answer to that question would determine not just the outcome of the current war, but the future of galactic civilization itself. 6 months after Kepler 442, the war was over. Not through negotiation, not through diplomatic compromise, and not through the elegant application of superior technology. The war ended because the hegemony forces found themselves facing an enemy they could neither understand nor effectively fight. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the rebuilt Council station, watching the signing ceremony that would officially end hostilities. Representatives from dozens of species filled the Great Hall below, but the focus of attention was on the human delegation table where Ambassador Elena Vasquez was putting her signature to documents that would reshape galactic civilization. Strange how quickly things can change, said High Counselor Zakth, his crystalline form appearing beside Chen at the observation window. 6 months ago, humanity was considered a minor partner in galactic affairs. Today, you're the most feared military power in known space. Chen didn't reply immediately. She was thinking about the battles that had followed Kepler 442, each one demonstrating the same fundamental truth. When simple physics met sophisticated technology, physics won the T. Hegemony had tried everything. Enhanced shields that could absorb energy weapon impacts proved useless against solid matter traveling at relativistic speeds. Point defense systems designed to intercept missiles couldn't track projectiles that were too small and too fast to target effectively. Evasive maneuvers that worked against energy weapons were meaningless against ballistic trajectories calculated by computers that could predict exactly where targets would be when projectiles arrived. Fear wasn't the goal, Chen said finally. Respect was. You certainly achieved that, Zack replied, though I'm not sure all the council members are entirely comfortable with the implications. Chen could understand their discomfort. The same civilizations that had spent millennia perfecting elegant energy weapons now found themselves scrambling to develop defenses against chunks of metal flying through space. It was like discovering that all your sophisticated swords were useless against someone throwing rocks with sufficient enthusiasm. The hegemony delegation is requesting private discussions with human representatives, Zack continued. They want to understand how your weapons work. Same as everyone else, Chen observed. Amazing how popular human technology has become now that people have seen what it can do. The truth was, half the galaxy was trying to reverse engineer human railgun technology, while the other half was developing countermeasures. Neither effort was proving particularly successful. The engineering principles behind magnetic acceleration weren't complicated, but the practical implementation required manufacturing techniques and power generation capabilities that most species simply didn't possess. "Admiral Chen!" came a voice from behind them. Chen turned to see General Krikstar approaching, his forearms moving in what she'd learned was a gesture of respectful greeting. "The Cathara Military Council has asked me to extend an invitation for joint training exercises with human forces." "Joint exercises?" Chen asked. "I thought the Cathara preferred to maintain operational independence." "That was before we discovered that our operational independence was dependent on fighting enemies who followed the same tactical principles we did," Krikstar replied with what might have been embarrassment. "Recent events have suggested that our military doctrine may need updating." Chen nodded. It was the closest thing to an admission of error that she'd ever heard from a Cathara officer. 6 months ago, they'd been dismissing human weapons as primitive throwbacks to a more barbaric age. Now they were asking for lessons in how to fight a war where energy shields and plasma barriers were irrelevant. "I'll discuss it with Earth Command," Chen said diplomatically. "Though I should point out that human tactics are still evolving. We're learning as much as anyone else about how these weapons change military operations." That was putting it mildly. The success at Kepler 442 had forced human military planners to completely rethink their assumptions about space warfare. When your weapons could destroy any target they hit but took significant time to charge and fire, traditional concepts like formations and maneuver warfare became meaningless. Every engagement became an exercise in mathematics and timing, calculating intercept points and energy expenditure with the precision of an orbital mechanics problem. The Ethereal Collective has also expressed interest in defensive consultations, Zack added. They're concerned about the vulnerability of their gravity well generators to kinetic impacts. Chen almost smiled. The Ethereals had spent centuries perfecting their ability to manipulate gravity as both a weapon and a defense system. Their ships could create localized fields that deflected energy weapons or crushed attacking vessels with invisible force. Against human railguns, those same gravity wells were worse than useless. They actually helped accelerate incoming projectiles. "Down in the ceremony hall," Chen said, watching the proceedings below, "Ambassador Vasquez is signing agreements that will fundamentally change how galactic civilization works. Are all the council members comfortable with that?" "Comfortable?" Zack's crystalline form shimmered with what might have been amusement. "Admiral, nothing about this situation is comfortable. We're dealing with weapons that make our most advanced defensive systems obsolete, deployed by a species we thought we understood completely. And now we're discovering that understanding and underestimating are not the same thing." Chen watched as Elena finished signing the documents and stood to address the assembled delegates. Even from this distance, Chen could see the change. In her posture, the confidence that came from representing a species that was no longer begging for acceptance. What your ambassador is about to announce, Zakth continued, will change everything. Are your people prepared for that level of responsibility? Chen considered the question. Humanity had gone from galactic newcomers to apex predators in the space of 6 months. Every major military power was now studying human tactics, trying to copy human technology, or developing strategies specifically designed to counter human weapons. The species that had once been dismissed as soft was now the standard by which military effectiveness was measured. I don't think anyone's ever prepared for that much change that quickly, Chen replied, but we'll adapt. Humans are good at that. Down in the ceremony hall, Elena was beginning her speech. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems, and Chen could hear the translation devices struggling to keep up with concepts that had no equivalent in most galactic languages. The Kepler 442 engagement proved something that many of us had forgotten, Elena was saying. Sometimes the most sophisticated problems have the most straightforward solutions. While the galaxy spent millennia perfecting energy weapons and exotic defensive systems, humanity focused on a simple question: what happens when you throw something hard enough? Chen could see alien delegates shifting in their seats. 6 months of military defeats had forced them to confront some uncomfortable truths about their assumptions regarding technological superiority. The answer, Elena continued, is that physics doesn't care how advanced your civilization is. A chunk of tungsten moving at 15% of light speed will destroy any target it hits, regardless of how sophisticated that target's defenses might be. She's not being particularly diplomatic, Zakth observed. Diplomacy is what you do when you need something from someone, Chen replied. What do we need from the galaxy that we can't take for ourselves? It was a harsh way to put it, but Chen knew it was accurate. Human kinetic weapons had made every existing military force obsolete overnight. The same council that had once condescended to humanity now needed human cooperation to maintain any semblance of galactic security. The war with the hegemony has ended, Elena announced to the assembly. Not because we achieved a negotiated settlement, but because the hegemony discovered that their military strategy was based on assumptions that are no longer valid. That was diplomatic language for, we destroyed their fleets until they surrendered unconditionally, Chen thought. Moving forward, Elena continued, humanity is prepared to share our kinetic weapon technology with Council military forces under appropriate licensing agreements. We're also prepared to assist in the development of defensive systems that might provide some protection against relativistic projectiles. Chen smiled at that phrasing. Some protection was optimistic. The fundamental problem with defending against railgun projectiles was that they arrived before you knew they were coming. By the time sensors detected incoming tungsten, the projectile was already hitting its target. In exchange, Elena said, humanity expects full recognition as a major galactic power with all the rights and responsibilities that status implies. No more mining quotas. No more supply runs to backwater systems. No more condescending assumptions about our technological capabilities. The silence that followed was deafening. Chen could see alien delegates processing the implications of Elena's words. Humanity wasn't asking for partnership. They were announcing their arrival as equals. The soft species has grown teeth, Elena concluded, echoing her words from 6 months earlier. The question now is how the galaxy chooses to respond to that reality. Chen turned away from the observation window as the ceremony continued below. The political details would be worked out over the coming months, but the fundamental shift had already occurred. Humanity had proved that technological sophistication and military effectiveness were not the same thing. Admiral, Zakth said. Quietly, there will be those who resent this change. Some species may attempt to develop countermeasures to your weapons, or even preemptive strikes to prevent human military expansion. Chen nodded. She'd expected that. And there will be others who want to ally with us for protection, or who try to steal our technology, or who decide that the galaxy would be safer if humans didn't exist. How do you plan to handle those challenges? Chen smiled, and there was something cold in her expression. The same way we handled the hegemony, by demonstrating that the most complex problems sometimes have very simple solutions. She looked back down at the ceremony, where Elena was shaking hands with delegates who 6 months earlier had barely acknowledged humanity's existence. The galaxy spent thousands of years perfecting the art of civilized warfare, Chen said. Energy weapons that could be countered by energy shields, plasma cannons that could be neutralized by particle fields. Elegant, sophisticated, predictable. She paused, watching alien faces that were still struggling to process what had happened to their carefully ordered universe. Then humanity showed up and asked a different question, Chen continued. Not how to fight more elegantly, but how to fight more effectively. And the answer turned out to be embarrassingly simple. Chen straightened her uniform and prepared to leave the observation deck. There were meetings to attend, reports to file, and plans to make for a galaxy that would never be the same. Sometimes, she said to Zack as she headed for the door, the best way to solve a problem is to throw rocks at it until it goes away. Behind her, the High Counselor's crystalline form shimmered with what might have been laughter or despair. In the great hall below, Ambassador Elena Vasquez was accepting congratulations from delegates representing the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The same species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive now sought their favor, their technology, and their protection. The soft species had indeed grown teeth, and the galaxy would never underestimate the power of throwing rocks very, very fast ever again.